What's up everybody? Hammerheart Metal Reviews here once again. Today we are doing something a little bit different. We are going to be reflecting back on the first half of this last decade, talking about some bands and albums that have really stood out to me from this first half of the decade, the 20s. It seems weird to be talking about the 20s as being the present day. When I say the 20s, it makes me think of really long time ago, the 1920s. But no, we're going to be focusing on the 2020s, the first half of the decade, albums that have come out from 2020 to 2024, the first 5 years of this decade, and just kind of give my overall thoughts on this first half of the decade, what it has looked like for metal overall. What kind of impressions has it left with me? Do I think it compares well to, say, the previous decade or the first half of the previous decade, like 2010 to 2014? Like, it just, there's so much good music out there this day and age. I feel like the amount of albums that are coming out is almost impossible to keep up with. The sheer volume blows away the volume of stuff that came out in decades past. But that's a good thing. It's a good problem to have. Maybe you're going to miss some albums. You can't check everything out. So hopefully, as I go through this today, there might be a few albums that maybe you haven't checked out before, a few bands that you haven't heard that you can take away and go listen to and explore, because that's what this is all about. For the purposes of this video, I'm not ranking anything. I'm not saying these are my favorite albums from the last 5 years. These are just ones that have stood out to me. I'm going to kind of go by subgenre as I go through this, and even within the certain subgenres, I'm not going to be ranking these. I'm just talking about some albums that have stood out to me. I'm sure I'm just not thinking of some. I didn't spend a shit ton of time going over this. I just went with the albums that are fresh in my mind, maybe ones that I've been listening to lately. But before we get into this, just want to say cheers to you all. Cheers to the first half of the 20s. Once again, seems so weird to say that, but yeah, going to be drinking some beer while we film this one, because I don't know how long it's going to be. I wrote a lot of albums down, so I'm going to get thirsty. Going to be taking some sips here and there. All right, cheers to you all. Okay, we are going to start off this video today with some death metal. And when I say death metal, for these first few albums, I'm just talking basically about old school death metal or like straight ahead death metal. If we're going to get into more progressive stuff, that'll come later in the video. So if you think I'm missing some stuff, keep your eyes peeled, keep your ears out for later in this video, because there'll be more progressive stuff coming later. But to kick this off for old school death metal, I'm going to talk about Skeletal Remains. They released a couple albums in the 20s. First one being The Entombment of Chaos from 2020. And then the second one being their newest, Fragments of the Ageless, which was just from last year, 2024. So yeah, an absolutely killer death metal band, keeping the flame alive of old school death metal. I feel like they're one of the best out there for like modern death metal, but still with that old school sound. So definitely go check them out if you haven't. Another one, Ripped to Shreds. They've actually had 3 albums come out in the 20s. Luan came out in 2020. Jubian came out in 2022, and Sanchi came out in 2024. I absolutely love the shreddy style that these guys play. It's a throwback to earlier days, but has that grindy edge to it. But I just love everything this band puts out. Absolutely killer stuff. Another band, one of my all-time favorite death metal bands, Exhumed. Which, if we're talking about the 20s, we're only talking about one album, their newest album, To the Dead, from 2022, but it still stands out to me as one of the better death metal albums of the last 5 years. I absolutely love everything this band has ever done, and this one is no exception. I actually think it's the best thing they had put out in quite some time. Exhumed, yeah, one of my favorites. Another newer band that was really capturing the old school vibe as well is Molder. All 3 of their releases have come out in the 20s. Their debut, Vanished Cadavers, can't even read my own writing, from 2020. Engrossed in Decay from 2022. And Catastrophic Reconfiguration, their most recent album, was just from last year, 2024. They just, yeah, I'm going to be repeating myself here. They just perfectly capture that old school vibe. It's got hints of death, hints of obituary, a lot of thrashiness to it as well. Just all in all, a great band. before I move to the next subgenre, I know we're kind of talking about old school death metal here. This next band I'm talking about isn't really an old school death metal band, but I wasn't sure where to fit them. It's not really progressive death metal, but in my mind, I would be remiss if I didn't mention what I think is one of the best death metal bands going, and that is Ulcerate. And their last two albums were both released in the 20s, Stare Into Death and Be Still from 2020, and their most recent, Cutting the Throat of God from 2024. Both absolutely phenomenal albums. The way that they just bring in this technicality and the dissonance with their overall atmosphere that they put on all their albums, and just the technical playing, the way the guitar and drums play off each other is just second to none. Absolutely killer death metal band. Had to be mentioned on this list. Before we move on to the next subgenre, I am going to take another sip of beer. And like I said before, it's not like these are the only death metal albums that I love from the last 5 years. These are just a few that are sticking out in my mind of bands that I feel like are going to leave their mark when people look back on the 20s and be like, oh, which bands really left their mark on the scene? These are kind of the bands that I'm thinking of. But yeah, now we are going to switch it up to some thrash and speed metal. So one of the bands that stands out to me from the last 5 years is Oxygen Destroyer. So they had a couple albums come out within the last 5 years. Their sophomore album, being Sinister Monstrosities Spawned by the Unfathomable Ignorance of Humankind, was from 2021. And then their most recent album, Guardians of the Universe, was from 2024. They play a really aggressive style of like blackened death thrash. Think like Creator meets Angel Corpse meets Absu. It's just absolutely killer. I feel like they're one of the best thrash bands out there right now for like current day. And yeah, I love everything they've put out. Just super aggressive, super fun, so headbangable. Next band I'm going to talk about is Evil Invaders. So most of their stuff was not released in the 20s. They kind of came out in the tail end of the last decade, but their newest album, Shattering Reflection, is from 2022, and I think it's absolutely killer. Maybe it's not my favorite album by them overall, but it still really stands out. In conjunction with their old school speed metal, they kind of brought in an injection of like 80s hair metal with this one as well. Like there's some elements of a band like Wasp thrown in with the pure thrashy and speed metal of a band like Exciter, and they just put their own spin on it. They're a super fun band. I love everything they've put out. And yeah, for a modern speed metal band, I don't think it gets much better than Evil Invaders. Next band is Bütcher. So kind of in the similar vein as Evil Invaders, their last couple albums, 666 Goats Carry My Chariot is from 2020, and their newest one, On Foul of Tyrant Wing, is from 2024. This band is really all about the vocalist. I shouldn't say all about the vocalist. Obviously, the songwriting and the riffs and the guitar playing are amazing, but the vocalist here just really does a lot of crazy stuff. He'll hit some King Diamond-esque falsettos. He'll do some blackened rasps as well, and it's just super high-paced, high energy, in-your-face, fun, awesome stuff. Butcher's a great band that you should definitely go check out. Speaking of great modern blackened thrash bands, gotta talk about Hellripper, the one-man project from the UK. His last couple albums were both from the 20s, being why can't I even think of what that? The Affairs of the Poisons is from 2021. I might have written that down wrong. And then of course Warlock Grim and Withered Hag from 2023. Blackened speed metal, blackened thrash, whatever you want to call it. Just super catchy, super fun. The vocals are more on the blackened edge, but the thrashy riffs wouldn't be out of place on like a Megadeth album. But it's just super intense speed and just catchy and fun. And that's what this style is all about. And Hellripper does it better than most. Really awesome stuff. Check out his whole discography, but I'm only talking about the ones that came out in the last 5 years. One more thrash band to talk about before we move on, and that is Vulture, who has put out a couple albums in the last 5 years as well. Dealing Death from 2021, and then Sentinels from 2024. Kind of similar to most of the bands that I've just talked about. Clearly when I'm talking about thrash in the modern age, my tendency is to go more in the blackened thrash direction as opposed to just classic thrash like Metallica or Testament. Of course there will be exceptions, but when I'm just thinking about the albums in this style that have stood out to me within the last 5 years, they're kind of all more in this blackened thrash kind of style. And Vulture's great, good vocalist, does a lot of really catchy songwriting here as well. All in all, another solid band. All right, I am going to take another sip here. And then now we are going to move on to traditional heavy metal. And yeah, I've got quite a few here to talk about because this is one of my favorite subgenres in metal, so I couldn't limit this one to only like 5. I think I have about 10 here to talk about. But let's find out what those are. And there's even so many more that I left off this list too. Yeah. Eternal Champion with Ravening Iron from 2020. This was their sophomore album. I love the debut even better than this album, but it's not within the last 5 years, so I'm only talking about albums that came out within the last 5 years. Ravening Iron is a great traditional heavy metal album, and they're just a great band. Definitely go listen to them. Cirith Ungol made a triumphant return with Forever Black in 2021, and then they followed that up with Dark Parade in 2023. It was a long time coming. I didn't think they would ever reform, but so glad that they did and that they left us with these 2 final albums before they are retiring, because it's just epic, doomy, traditional heavy metal done right with crazy vocals that I absolutely love. Classic band coming back to leave us with a couple gifts for the new decade. Riot City, definitely one of my favorite current Canadian bands. Their debut is great, but that was from 2019, I believe. But the album from this decade was Electric Elite from 2022, which is absolutely amazing. Super fast, in-your-face metal. Think like Judas Priest on speed. It's just awesome, awesome stuff. I can't pump up this band enough. Just killer stuff. Up next, Triumpher, Greek epic heavy metal, mix of some little power metal in there as well, and some Blackened Edge in there. Also, both of their albums have come out within the last couple of years, being Storming the Walls from 2023, an absolutely phenomenal debut. And then even better than that, in my opinion, is their sophomore album, which just came out last year, Spirit Invictus, which I'm sure you have heard me talk about on this channel on a few occasions because I absolutely love that album to death. The vocals will remind you a little bit of Manowar, but it's got like a more aggressive edge to it, and these songs are just stuck in my head forever. I absolutely love this band. One of the best out there in this genre, for sure. Up next, going with Blazon Rite. Their album Endless Halls of Golden Totem. That was their debut from 2021. And then their sophomore Wild Rites and Ancient Songs from 2023. I think capitalized on that debut and pushed them even further into better territory. The singer has this really baritone, rich voice and just classic heavy metal. They throw a few twists and curveballs in there as well, but another band that just definitely you should be checking out if you're into traditional heavy metal because they're just one of the best out there for the modern age. Up next, Bloodstar. They've only got 1 album so far. First Sighting from 2023. This features one of the guitarists from Visigoth, and then the vocalist, she has this just great, powerful voice. I believe they also put out an EP as well. I didn't write that down for the year. It probably was within the last 5 years. It was probably 2021 or something, if my memory serves, but I cannot remember. So I'm just talking about their full-length debut, First Sighting. It's only like just over half an hour. That's really my only knock on this album, but it's just a solid album from front to back. It's a ton of fun. One of my favorite modern traditional heavy metal bands, Century, released an absolute classic, being The Conquest of Time in 2023. They also have a new album coming out literally next week, which I'm extremely pumped for. But The Conquest of Time, I believe, if my memory serves, I actually put it as my #1 album of 2023. If I went back and redid that list, would it still be there? It would be right in the running for sure. But yeah, the riffs on this album, absolutely insane. It's so catchy. This reminds me of bands like Heavy Load, and it's just Swedish heavy metal done the right way. Absolutely amazing stuff. Another album and band that I've talked about extensively on this channel, Helms Deep, with their debut album Treacherous Ways from 2023. As soon as I heard this album, I absolutely fell in love with it. You've got elements of all these different like bands or influences from the 80s, whether it be John Oliva from Sabotage or maybe some King Diamond-esque moments. It's got some thrashy moments that maybe bring to mind a band like Megadeth, but he brings it all together to do his own thing here. I'm saying him, it's not a one-man band. One dude wrote all the songs, but he brought in a couple of the guys from Raven to help him out on bass and drums. But yeah, the main man behind the band just rips guitar. I love his out-of-control vocal approach here. This is just I feel like this is going to stand the test of time and be a classic in another 10 years. It's just an absolutely killer album, so I don't care if I've talked about it a lot. I'm talking about it again because I fucking love it. Going with another Canadian band now with Traveller, and their last couple albums, Termination Shock from 2020 and then Prequel to Madness from 2024. Unfortunately, I just found out that Traveller has disbanded now. That was very disheartening news to me. They said that they're still going to do some individual side projects, which is great. I mean, I wish them all the best, and I can't wait to see what each of the members does. But yeah, Traveller was a great fucking traditional heavy metal band. All three of their albums, their debut is maybe even their best, but it wasn't from the 20s, so I gotta keep this focused on just this decade. But yeah, absolutely killer band that you should for sure be listening to. One more band in this section before we move it along, and that is Morgul Blade. Their debut album, Fell Sorcery Abounds, came out in 2021, and then their sophomore album, Heavy Metal Race, came out just this last year, 2024. This is some very Lord of the Rings inspired heavy metal. It brings in a little bit of a blackened edge just with the vocals. I wouldn't say the music is in the black metal vein really much at all. This is classic heavy metal just with raspy vocals. So maybe a band like Mal Carpatan will come to mind. But this is very much more on the traditional heavy metal side of things. But these songs are so catchy. I fucking love this band. Both of these albums just kick so much ass. I'm really hoping I can catch them live one day. But yeah, those are some standout traditional heavy metal albums. Now I'm going to take another sip of beer, and then we're going to get into some power metal. Alright, let's talk about power metal now. One of my all-time favorite power metal bands, obviously I got to mention here, Blind Guardian, their newest album, The God Machine. Absolutely insane. Very good album. It's not their best ever, but I can't talk about power metal in the last 5 years without mentioning that album because it is that good. Am I biased because they're my favorite band of all time? Maybe, but I don't care. I'm putting it here. It's a great album. It deserves to be mentioned. Another one of my favorite power metal bands of all time is Helloween, and their newest self-titled album from 2021, Helloween, was absolutely phenomenal. Maybe there's a few songs that it could have been trimmed a little bit, but bringing in all three vocalists being Kai Hansen, Michael Kiske, and Andy Darris, and somehow making it work and finding the right balance, that must have been so tough, but they really succeeded and they pulled it off. And you got a song like Skyfall that is an all-time classic already. Great power metal album. More of an underrated one here is Eternity's End with Embers of War from 2021. This is somewhat of a super group, and yeah, it just brings in these almost like technical death metal musicians but playing power metal, and the vocals are really good as well. This album just absolutely floored me with its technicality when I first heard it. If you've never heard this before, do yourself a favor and go listen to it right now. The guitar playing on this album is insane. The drumming matches it, and the vocals are great. This is an absolute standout from the last 5 years in terms of power metal. For me, easily a top 5 power metal album from the last 5 years. Twilight Force. Can't do this without talking about Twilight Force, their newest album, At the Heart of Winterfylleth from 2023. It's like they're the logical, spiritual successors to Rhapsody. It's got the same vibe as early Rhapsody, but maybe even they're putting more of a fun, cheesy twist on it, not taking it too seriously. But I absolutely love everything they're doing. I enjoy every album they've put out, and their newest one was no exception. Thornbridge. Their newest album, Daydream Illusion from 2024. This band very much channels Orden Ogan and Blind Guardian, but they put their own spin on it. Yes, there's going to be a lot of similarities to those bands, but these songs are so goddamn catchy. Every time they put out an album, the songs just stick in my head. They know how to write a catchy chorus, and that's why I had to put this here. An up-and-coming band, Frozen Crown, has really kind of left their mark on the last 5 years. Their last couple albums, Call of the North from 2023 and War Hearts from 2024, they're really solidifying their place as one of the better power metal bands out there for the modern age. And I just love everything about this band. The vocalist has a great voice. They've now got 3 guitarists that really just play off of each other and super technical solos. And it's just, they're putting out solid album after solid album, and I applaud them for it. One last one to go, which I am going to say is, out of everything here, my favorite power metal album of the last 5 years is one of these two albums. They actually have two albums that came out within the last 5 years, and that is Sacred Outcry. Their debut album, Damned for All Time, came out in 2020, and it is amazing. It's not the one I'm talking about as being my top power metal album of the last 5 years, but it's not even too far off. I fucking love this album. But then their sophomore album, Towers of Gold, ups the ante, and it's just even better. This one was from 2023, and yeah, it was one of my favorite albums of that year. And like I said, I'm not over-exaggerating. I think this easily is my favorite power metal album of the last 5 years. It's just that goddamn good. It's that epic. It's got the vocalist from Lost Horizon, Daniel Hyman, and this is just Greek power metal glory. Absolutely amazing. I'm going to drink some more beer. We're going to move this on to another subgenre. All right, now let's talk about some doom metal. So to kick it off, I'm going to go with Hooded Menace and their newest album, The Tritonus Bell, from 2021. Absolutely one of my favorite doom albums from this decade. It's just death doom done right. They put their own spin on this. Their sound is so melodic. Like, yes, it's heavy, focused on the doom and the death, but they've almost brought in like a traditional heavy metal influence this time around as well with some of the guitar melodies, and their combination just really worked here. Each one of their albums kind of has a different flavor to it or a different flair to it. This one does stand out compared to their other albums, but yeah, I absolutely love this when it came out, and I still spin it all the time. Saturnus with The Storm Within from 2023. This was their first album in a very long time, sticking with death doom again here. This is very much on the sorrowful, melodic side of things. This is just a beautifully depressing album, but I love the gorgeous melodies that they put out here. It's just absolutely killer stuff. If you've never checked them out, go check out their whole discography. But once again, I keep getting off track. I'm not talking about bands' whole discographies. I'm just talking about stuff that's come out in this decade. And yeah, that album kicks ass. Isole with Anisadora from 2023. This band features the dudes from Arab Altor, but this time just playing epic doom. And this album absolutely floored me when it came out. It's some of my favorite doom songs from the last few years for sure. It's just epic doom that I absolutely fall in love with. Like, the vocals here are so soaring and epic, and yeah, it's gonna bring your mood down, but that's what this kind of music is supposed to do. And yeah, this album is just done the right way. Amazing stuff. Go with Crossvault next with their newest album, As Strangers We Depart, from 2021. So this features the vocalist from Horn on vocals, but there's no black metal here. This is pure doom. This is their third album. I really enjoyed their first two albums, but this one took it up a notch, and it's almost bringing in like epic Bathory, like the epic era of Bathory to their sound, which kind of just took it to the next level. Really have developed their sound over 3 albums. I feel like we might be getting a new album from them this year, but if you've never checked out Crossvault before, I mean, they're super underrated, but start with As Strangers We Depart, their newest album. It is just a phenomenal album. Absolutely love it. Up next, going to go with a band that released their newest album just this last year, Crypt Sermon with the Stygian Rose. I feel like they're really leaving their mark as one of the best current doom bands out there. This time around, kind of similar to what I said a couple albums ago, they're bringing in a traditional heavy metal influence with their epic doom here as well, and just adds this extra flavor to it that just makes it stand out amongst the crowd of great doom albums and great doom bands. But yeah, Crypt Sermon is easily standing out in the crowd, like I said, and the Stygian Rose was a great album. Lastly, for doom, I'm going to talk about a band that I just did a video on last week, and that is the Flight of Sleipnir. Obviously very fresh in my mind from just doing their discography ranking, but yeah, their last couple albums that are within the last 5 years are absolutely excellent. Eventide from 2021. And then Nature's Cadence from 2024, which actually was in my top 5 albums from last year because that's how highly I think of it. They have this very unique style of combining doom, but with atmospheric folk, some elements of black metal, some stoner fuzz. Like, throw every genre out there, they're probably pulling something from it. There's some prog in there as well, but they really make it their own and make it work, and I absolutely love this band, and both of these albums were just killer. I'm going to drink some more beer, and then we're going to move on to black metal. So I had a really hard time trying to narrow down my black metal picks to only like 5 to 10. So I think I have about 20 black metal bands here that have stood out to me in the last 5 years. Some of these are new bands that have just kind of started in the last 5 years, and then a couple of them are bands that I've loved for a long time that have just released some new material within the last decade. But yeah, let's find out what those are. So to kick it off, I'm going to go with Winterfylleth. The Reckoning Dawn was released in 2020, and the Imperious Horizon from 2024. So this is one of the best atmospheric black metal bands out there. They're from the UK. Both of these albums kick so much ass. I will say I think my favorite era of the band is still their first couple albums, but they never disappoint. Like, every album they release is top-notch black metal, and these two are no exception. Up next, going with Havukruunu, their album Ueno Suyamota Sota from 2020, and their EP also Ku Yerkilian Ila from 2021. I am probably butchering both of those pronunciations, and they actually have a new album just coming out next month, which I'm extremely pumped for. But yeah, just talking about the first half of the decade, this is some of the best black metal out there. This is pagan black metal that's so focused on the riffs. It just has this epic, triumphant feel to it. Absolutely amazing. I can't recommend this band highly enough. Even though I don't understand a goddamn word of what they're singing about, I can just feel that it's something about like triumphant battles and epic wars, because that's just the vibe that it has. But maybe that's just me, but I fucking love it. Up next, going with Stormkeep. They released their debut EP Galdrum in 2020, and then their full-length debut Tales of Other Time in 2021. So this is some symphonic, melodic black metal, very much in the vein of like early Emperor, but then there's some shades of other bands in there. There's some moments that might remind you of a band like Borknagar with some of the clean singing, where they bring in Jake Rogers from Gallowbraid and Caladan Brood. But yeah, this band is definitely one to keep your eye on. I cannot wait for another album by them. Hopefully we get one this year. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But yeah, Stormkeep, brilliant stuff. Absolutely love them. Up next, a band you might be sick of me talking about because they're one of my favorite bands, but I'm going to talk about them again, and that is Horn. From this decade, he has been very busy. 2020, he released the album Mongang. Absolutely amazing. 2022, he released Verzet, possibly my favorite Horn album ever. It's very folky, but still retains his core sound. It's just a goddamn masterpiece. 2023, he released the compilation 20 Yare, where he went back and re-recorded songs from his earlier days in a more of a modern setting. And then 2024, his newest release, Dog's Yark, was, what did I have it, number 2 or number 3 in my top albums of last year? Like, this man is so busy, not just with Horn, but with all his other projects as well. But the consistent quality that he's putting out is just insane. I don't know how he does it, but yeah, anytime he releases anything, I am definitely on board, and I will be picking it up because it's just that good. Up next, going Mare Cognitum. 2020, he released The Wanderers, split between him and Spectral Lore. And then 2021, his own album, Solar Paroxysm, which is possibly the best Mare Cognitum album. Maybe I'd give the edge to Luminiferous Ether, but nonetheless, I keep getting off track talking about other albums. Let's focus on this decade. But yeah, both of these are just insanely good. This is cosmic, atmospheric black metal, and in my mind, for this specific like genre of cosmic black metal, no one does it better than Mare Cognitum. He just has this sound down. His cascading way of playing these riffs is just insane. I fucking love everything that he has released. It is just masterpiece after masterpiece. We need a new Mare Cognitum album too immediately. But yeah, hopefully we get one. If you somehow have not heard these, go check out both these albums. Up next, going with Saor and their album Origins from 2022. Another project that has a new album coming out next month that I'm extremely pumped for. This is a band I've talked about countless times on this channel. I can't even talk right now. Maybe the beers are hitting me. I don't know. But yeah, Scottish atmospheric black metal with some folk in there. One-man band. This just no other band transports you to their homeland like Saor does. They just do it perfectly. This album was no exception. It's not my favorite by them, but it's still enough for me to put it on this list because anything he releases is a standout in my mind because it's that goddamn good. Up next, I'll go with Véhémence with the album Ordalie from 2022. This is French medieval black metal. The riffs and melodies here and the amount of folk that they bring in, I fucking love this project. I love it so goddamn much. I need another new Véhémence album as well. Hopefully we get that soon. And kind of split off from Véhémence, the different band that features the same vocalist is Hunter Naz, released an absolutely killer album, Au Fleuve de Loire, in 2021. I feel like this one didn't get nearly the same amount of attention as the Véhémence album, but it should, because this album is fucking amazing. Still French black metal, but bringing in a lot of folky elements. It doesn't necessarily have the same medieval vibe to it, but the riffs on here are just so good. I fucking love this album. Please go listen to it if you haven't. Cân Bardd is up next. This is some Swiss atmospheric black metal, kind of sticking with the theme here. I started thinking about atmospheric black metal and just thought of Saor, and now Cân Bardd as well. Devoured by the Oak from 2021 was their third album and is a masterpiece. Another band that I am really hoping releases something else soon. But yeah, I just fucking love this style of atmospheric black metal. It just scratches an itch every time I hear something that's done this well in this style. I can't resist it. I fucking love it. I'm going to take another sip of beer because I'm talking some nonsense here. Maybe I am a little bit drunk. This is like my third beer today, but I felt like recording a video, whatever. If I've had a few, it doesn't matter. I'll stutter some words. I'll slur some words. I don't fucking care. You're here for a reason, and that's because you enjoy my nonsense. So let's keep some more nonsense going. Up next, I'm going to go with Ungfell. So they've released their last couple albums in this decade. S. Grauet from 2021 and De Gornt just from last year. Another band from Switzerland, but not really on the atmospheric black metal side, more on the medieval, frantic-paced, riff-filled black metal style. It's just super folky, but the riff style, like this is a band that will remind you a little bit of a band like Véhémence or Peste Noire, but they just really bring in their Swiss folklore, and I just love everything that this band does. Great stuff. Let's move this along. Up next, Ancient Mastery. So this is a one-man band from Austria. Every one of his releases has been from this decade, being Chapter 1 was from 2021. Then he did also release an EP later that year called The Chosen One. And then I think his best release is his newest, Chapter 2 from 2022. So he had been pretty consistent releasing something every year. It's been a few years now. So hopefully we get something else very soon. But if you're unfamiliar with this project, this is very epic black metal. It brings in some different elements, almost like a pop element with some of the female vocals that he intersperses there. She sounds like a bard in a tavern, like a tavern wench kind of singing to the crowd, but then he comes in with his epic black metal. There's elements of a band like Summoning, but then like some melodic traditional heavy metal riffs like Iron Maiden twin guitar melodies that really just spice things up. It's just such a unique combination, and I love everything he's released so far. Another very current band, Storm Ruler. I saw this band live and they blew my socks off. Their debut, Under the Burning Eclipse, from 2021 was fucking excellent. And their sophomore album, Sacred Rites and Black Magic, from 2022 was right on par with it. I have a really hard time picking which one I like better, but I already loved this band, and then seeing them live just elevated them even more. I think they're one of the best like current black metal bands out there. Just riffs for days. Fucking great stuff. Up next, go with some Canadian content with Liminal Shroud, another band that's only been in existence for this decade. Their debut, Through the False Narrows, was from 2020. Then their sophomore album, All Virtues Ablaze, from 2022. And then their newest, Visions of Collapse, from 2024. This band just keeps getting better with each release. Like, honestly, Visions of Collapse is easily my favorite by them. But check out all three of these albums because they're all really good. The drumming and guitar playing here are just top notch. Like, this is just, they're really rising as one of my favorite current black metal bands. I fucking love them. Let's keep this going because my drunk brain isn't processing things as quickly as it should. But let's go up next. Afski with their album Oft Drummer Mig Dodd from 2020, and then the follow-up to that 100R from 2023. So this band, absolutely insane how they bring in so much aggression, yet it's still rooted in this melancholy. Like, these songs are so depressingly sad, but then so aggressively harsh at the same time, and it's this really fine balance that he achieves here, and I just absolutely love these two albums. Some of the best black metal out there. I'm repeating myself. I'm saying that about everything. Is everything the best black metal? No, come on. But nonetheless, go check out ASCII. Up next, Moonlight Sorcery. They came out with their Piercing Through the Frozen Eternity debut EP back in 2022. Then later in that same year, released another EP, Nightwind. And then their full-length debut finally came out in 2023, titled Horned Lord of the Thorned Castle. So this is some symphonic black metal that brings in a major element from power metal. Like, it has this huge influence from power metal, but the guitar playing is so insanely good. It's like neoclassical guitar solos over top of symphonic black metal, and it's just a combo that you don't get too often, but they really pull it off and they make it work. Maybe it sounds cheesy to some, but I love it. I think they're great, and that's why I put them on this list. Okay, we got a few more black metal albums to go before we move this along. Up next, going with Valdrin. So their most recent album is from 2023, Throne of the Lunar Soul. That's easily their best. It's a fucking masterpiece. But also the album before that, Effigy of Nothingness, in 2020. That's not even the album name. Wow. Effigies of Nightmares. I knew that didn't sound right. I can't read my writing, but as soon as I said that, I'm like, that's just not correct. Effigies of Nightmares was from 2020. And they have a couple albums before that as well that are both very good. But their fourth album, Throne of the Lunar Soul, is where it's at. That is a masterpiece of just epic black metal. All their albums are the same concept about this self-written fantasy story, and that checks all the boxes for me. I'm a nerd for that kind of stuff, and I absolutely love this band. Check them out, please. Up next, Wayfarer, A Romance with Violence was from 2020, and then American Gothic was from 2023. This is an atmospheric black metal band from Colorado. They like to bring in some Western influence with just like a lot of Americana thrown into their music, which may not be for everyone, but they don't overdo it. They kind of just have their own style, and I just dig it a lot, especially American Gothic. I think that was the culmination of everything they had been working towards, and they really pulled it off. Two more black metal bands to talk about, I promise, and then we'll move this along. Aclese, Melano from 2020, nightmarish, hellish landscapes, soundscapes, and then their newest one, House of the Black Geminus from last year, continues in that same vein. I do like Melano better than House of the Black Geminus, and actually I like the album before even better than both, but that's not from this decade, so once again, I will not talk about that. But yeah, if you just want some super scary black metal that is going to suffocate you and just chaos in your brain, definitely check out Aclese. And lastly, going with Jevel. They've released 3 albums in this decade. Tanker, Psalm, or Rotten. I'm going to butcher all of these, so I apologize in advance. That's from 2021. Non-Screeder, Not in Sort from 2022. And Not Till End from 2024. That one I think maybe I was a little bit closer on. But yeah, honestly, one of the best black metal bands out there. Every album they released is top-notch. This is just Norwegian black metal done the right way. It's fucking great. Every release that comes out, you just know what you're getting, and that's quality black metal. I know there's some that I just wasn't thinking of here, didn't mention, but these are the ones that just stood out to me the most. But I'm going to take another sip, and then we got one more section to go here. All right. Up next is kind of just the leftovers, other genres that maybe I'm not going to have as big of a list of. So this is going to include like progressive metal, melodic death metal, symphonic metal, just things that maybe didn't fit in as nicely to the other categories. So starting with like prog, I'm going to have to talk about Jotun. This band has just really, since they arrived, have just left such an impression on me. Like, they're becoming one of my favorites out there. Access All Worlds from 2021 just blew up on the scene, and rightfully so. Great fucking album. And then their newest, Kinship, from last year was my number one album of 2024. This is like extreme progressive metal, extreme or progressive melodic death metal with some hints of power metal. The vocals are fucking amazing. The solos are amazing. Musicianship all around amazing on both of these albums. Killer stuff. Had to talk about this band. I'll go with Tomb Mold next with the Enduring Spirit from 2023. So, I mean, I could have put Tomb Mold in my, like, regular death metal section, but this album's definitely more on the prog side of things, and that's the one from the 20s. So that's the one I'm talking about. I'm putting it in this section. Just, yeah, a solid style of progressive death metal. Easily one of my favorites in the style for the last few years. Kind of similar with progressive death metal. Have to talk about Blood Incantation with their recent Absolute Elsewhere from last year. I mean, everyone's talking about this album, and once again, rightfully so. It took a long, deep shot at some experimentation, but it really worked. They pulled it off for the most part. It's just a crazy album that's really good. And lastly, for progressive death metal, Opeth. Obviously, I'm going to talk about Opeth, The Last Will and Testament, their newest album from last year as well. I could never talk about progressive death metal and not include Opeth on like any list unless they didn't release an album in that time frame, because they're just the best out there, and this album is no exception. Fucking brilliant stuff. Move it along to some mellow death. I don't listen to a ton of mellow death anymore, but when albums stand out, then I still take note. So Kalma with their self-titled album from 2023, I think that's one of the best mellow death albums of the last 5 years for sure. They've just been keeping that flame burning for a long time. They're one of my favorite melodic death metal bands for a reason. Another great one is Brimir with Voices in the Sky from 2022. I love the amount of like folkiness that they bring in. The riffs are great. They bring in some clean singing and the harsh singing, and this album as a whole is just top-notch stuff. Then Aphanemer with A Dream of Wilderness from 2021. Feel like this one is a little bit more underrated, but it's absolutely killer stuff. Love this album as well. Definitely go check out all of those. And then the last couple bands I'm going to talk about are bands that are hard to fit into other categories. So first of all, I'm going to talk about Erebaltor with their album Vargtimmen from 2022. So I mean, there's elements of epic doom, there's epic folk, there's Viking black metal in their sound. So it's hard for me to put this in just one blanket category, but this is just a great fucking band. They have a new album coming out next month as well, which I've already pre-ordered. But yeah, Vargtimmen, go listen to the song I Have the Sky. One of my favorite songs of that year, and it just is constantly stuck in my head. It's goddamn amazing. And then the last band that I'm going to talk about today is a symphonic metal band, which I can honestly say, since 2020, it has probably been one of my most listened to bands. Might not be for everyone, but I goddamn love it. And that is Seven Spires. So their debut album came out, I think, 2018 or 2019. And it was decent, but they really built upon that foundation as we entered the new decade. Their sophomore album, Emerald Seas, from 2020. Top-notch, amazing stuff. The follow-up to that, Gods of Debauchery, from 2021, is like almost 80 minutes of symphonic metal glory. And then their newest album, A Fortress Called Home, from 2024, was one of my absolute favorites of the year. Easily one of my most listened to albums of the year. So yeah, it's a band that really I have a hard time putting. I could have put them in the power metal section, but they're not really truly a power metal band. There's power metal elements in there, but it's a symphonic metal band, but they pull so many different influences, and really they just sound like themselves. There's no one else out there doing what they're doing, and that's what makes them unique and really makes them stand out. You've got elements of so many different styles. They'll even go raging symphonic black metal in 1 second. They'll do death doom the next. They'll do a folksy ballad the next. And then they'll have a epic power metal song as well. Like, it's just absolutely killer band. I would be remiss not to include them in any list where I'm talking about 2020 to 2024, because I've just been listening to the shit out of them for the last 5 years. And yeah, we're going to kind of wrap it up there, but I'll give you my overall thoughts. So the first half of this decade, how does it compare to, say, 2010 to 2014? it's almost an impossible question because the previous decade, I've spent over 10 years with those albums. So time always changes things. There's a lot of times where I might think an album is going to be an all-time classic, but then 5 years later, I'm not really listening to it as much. But there are some albums that came out in the 2010 to 2014 range that are still standing up there as what I consider some of my favorite albums of all time. For example, Caladan Brood. Has there been any albums from 2020 to 2024 that I would put on that same level? Maybe not yet, but I think there's a couple that would flirt with it for sure. So we'll see in time. If I had to give the edge, I'm going to give the edge to 2010 to 2014 once again, just because of the amount of time I've spent with them. But just looking at this half decade so far, I think it's absolutely amazing the amount of quality releases that we've been getting and the amount of great metal that is being released literally every day. It's crazy. So yeah, once again, cheers to you all. This is way too long of a video. Oh, this is going to be fun to edit after, put all these albums on there. Whew. Not for today. I don't think that's going to happen. But by the time you're watching it, it's already going to be edited. I'm just having some thoughts to myself here. But yeah, cheers to you all. This is kind of ridiculous. Maybe I won't drink this much before future videos because it's probably not turning out as well. But whatever. I'm going to upload it anyway because I don't give a shit. But until next time, Hammerheart Metal Reviews out.